Right, guys, so let us now move to part B of our lesson, where we're going to be discussing in detail the factors that influences the price of natural resources. Remember, what do we mean by an influence of the price, or what do we mean by influence on the price? Guys, remember that natural resources, as we indicated, that we're going to be dealing with those natural resources that have economic value. So that economic value or price, as we consider them to be economic goods, which means they have exchange value, that value fluctuates over time depending on certain factors that we're going to be discussing in detail today. That means we're going to be looking into the factors that influences an increase in the price of a natural resource or a decrease in the price of natural resource, depending on what type or what kind of a natural resource are we dealing with. But for the purposes of our curriculum and for the purposes of the content that we must cover, we're not per se going to go into specific or specifications of natural resources per se, but we will make an example of a common natural resource that all of us who are familiar with in order for you to be able to understand these factors and how are they used to influence the prices for those natural resources. In a nutshell, we're going to be looking at the factors. We're going to look at the key factors that decides or that influences a decision for the price of a natural resource to increase or to decrease or to remain constant depending on the circumstances in the economy at that particular time. It's all together. Right, so we're going to start with demand and supply as the first factor that influences the price of natural resources. Guys, first thing first, the supply of natural resources such as land, for example, is fixed. Remember that land is fixed. You cannot extend land. We cannot expand land. Okay, the land that the nature has provided us cannot be extended. Are we still together? Yes, so the supply of natural resource such as land is fixed while its demand is forever increasing. Guys, remember that as much as the land is fixed, many people are still demanding land. For example, if a municipality says only 20,000 hectares of land in your municipal area is reserved for residential areas, of course, people are going to be buying portions of land to build their own houses until they fill that particular 20,000 hectares of land. However, there are people who are still getting employed. There are still people who are migrating to other areas. There are still people who are moving into other areas who needs the land in order to build their own houses. Unfortunately, while the demand for land is high, the supply for land is fixed. Then what does this mean? That a further increase in demand and limited supply for natural resources such as land may result to an increase in prices. That is why it is possible that when a person buys land and the person has bought land, for example, as a natural resource in 1995, he only paid 1,000 rand for 1 hectare of land in Johannesburg. Are we still together? Yes, so the person bought 1,000 hectares of land for 1,500 back in the 1990s, in 1995, for example. But today, in 2025, the very same 1,000 hectares of land that was bought by 1,500 back in the day is now being sold for 25 million. Why? Because the seller of the land works with what you call a willing buyer, a willing seller policy. He understands that in 2025, the demand for land is much higher than demand for land in 1995. In 1995, a person bought land in order to build a house. But in 2025, the same 1,000 hectares of land is demanded by Matsaneng Holdings in order to build student accommodations as a business. Therefore, the price for that land has increased because supply of land has remained limited or fixed, while demand now have increased. Are we still together? Yes, therefore, the higher the demand for land, the higher the price the seller would put on that particular land. The same as we discussed with the forces of demand and supply in grade 10 when we're doing the price formation. When you're doing the graph for price formation, we indicated that once we experience an increase in demand, but supply remain fixed, that is going to push what? That is going to push for an increase in prices, meaning the producers will sell to those who are willing to pay the higher price for that particular good or service in the market. Are we still together? Yes, therefore we say these forces of demand and supply affect the value of rent paid as remuneration for natural resources. Are we still together? Fantastic. Now let us look at climate. How does climate influence the price of natural resources? How does the climate as a factor determines whether the price or remuneration for natural resource, irrespective of what the nature of that natural resource is, the price or the rent increases or decreases. Guys, one, what is important? Climate has an important impact on agricultural land. That is the first thing you must discuss. Very important when you discuss climate as a factor that influences the price of natural resources. Climate has an important impact on agricultural land. Why do we say climate has an important impact on agricultural land? On how is that even possible? Guys, the second part, unlike in desert areas, you know that we have tropical areas and we have desert areas. Desert areas, you can talk about Saudi Arabia or Egypt, which is just a lot of sand, while tropical, it's more of a normal land that has crops, trees, and so forth. So, unlike in desert areas, in tropical areas of the world, in other parts of the world, agricultural land is useful enough to produce different agricultural crops. Examples given, we may talk about fruits and talk about vegetables. So in a desert land, for example, in Saudi Arabia, you cannot grow fruit and vegetables in an area where it's a desert. But you can plant and grow crops, you can plant and grow fruit and vegetables in tropical land or agricultural land. So the usefulness or the useful agricultural land will therefore command a much higher rent than land that is of lesser value. And what does this mean? It means that if you want to plant oranges and you are in Saudi Arabia, and I also want to plant oranges, and I am in South Africa, the rent that will apply to both of us will not be the same. I, who is in South Africa, will pay the higher rent to plant oranges. Why? Because I'm in a tropical based area. That is the most useful agricultural land to do what? To plant or farm oranges. While it will be cheaper and the rent will be extremely lesser in Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia is what is a desert a country where there are a lot of deserts than tropical than agricultural lands rather that can be used to do what? To grow or farm oranges. So that is how the climate as well as demand and supply influences the prices of natural resources, meaning this is how these two factors influences an increase or decrease in rent for natural resources. If there are any questions, please do forward them for discussion. Are we still together before we proceed? Right, guys, so let us now move to the third factor that influences the price of natural resources, so that influences the remuneration for natural resources, which in this instance we refer to to rent. And remember, we said whenever we speak of influence, we speak about an increase or decrease in the price or rent for natural resources as a remuneration. Right, we're going to move into discussing location. How is location influencing the price for natural resources in the economy? Guys, the rent in urban residential areas is influenced by the proximity of schools, shops, effective transport, and communication. Very important. What you're going to be aware is that in the economy we have urban areas and we also have rural areas. The standard of living in urban areas is not the same as the standard of living in rural areas. Therefore, the cost of living in urban areas in general will not be the same as the cost of living in rural areas. But in economics context, how do we use the location, or how is location used to influence the price of rent as a remuneration for factors of production? The rent in urban areas, meaning in cities and towns, is influenced by the proximity of schools, shops, effective transport and communication, meaning the rent for any area is influenced. The closer the area is to the schools, the closer the suburb is to the shops, or the closer the suburb is to the effective transport network and communication, the higher the rent is going to be. Typically, the rent on businesses as well, in terms of in the business perspective, it is also determined by the business location. That is why you're going to learn in business studies the importance of location for the business. Because the business, if it is located in a highly populated area, in a town or city, it means ultimately that business is going to have more sales because there are more people in cities and towns than people are in rural areas. Therefore, the income that is expected to be generated by a business that is based in a city or town is higher than the income expected to be generated by a business that is located in the rural areas. Ultimately, the rent that must be paid by that particular business in the urban areas will not be the same rent that has to be paid by a business in rural areas. While, for example, you may have a shop right in Durban, that ShopRite in Durban will not pay the same rent as the ShopRite that you'll find in Ulundi, because Ulundi is in a rural area and Durban is in an urban area. So their rent paid by the same business will not be the same based on the location of that particular business. Similarly to the residential or urban areas that we have made a reference to in the above point. You may have the University of the Free State that is based in Bloemfontein, and Bloemfontein is the capital city of the Free State province. And we also have another campus of the University of the Free State that is based in Kwakwa, and Kwakwa is a rural-based area. These are the two campuses of the same University of the Free State. However, the students that are residing in student accommodation at University of the Free State Bloemfontein campus, they pay about 1,500 per month in rental, for example. Why? Because they are based in Bloemfontein, and Bloemfontein is a city. But the students that are residing in student accommodation of the University of the Free State in Kwakwa campus, they only pay 900 or 800 rand in rent per month. Why is that? Because the students that are residing in residential areas in Bloemfontein, they have proximity to the number of schools, to shops, to effective transport and communication because they're based in town or city. Unlike those in rural areas where they do not have an access to or they are not close to the proximity to schools, shops, and they do not have effective transport and communication. In short, with that example, you may realize that the students in Bloemfontein of the University of the Free State, they have access, for example, they have access to Mimosa Mall, they have access to Waterfront Lochloeken Mall, they have access to these other malls, the Macro Mall, and all these other malls that you find in Bloemfontein. While the students that are in the University of the Free State, Kwakwa campus, they only have one mall, which is based in Maluti Crescent in CT. So you can draw the distinction and the access of the facilities and how such an access to facilities or availability thereof influences the price for rent. So this is very important for us to say that therefore the rent paid by individuals or businesses in urban areas will be higher than those in rural areas, as we have made an example with ShopRite as well. What does this say? This say if you reside in an urban area or a city, or your business is located in an urban area city, your rent will be higher than someone who resides in a rural area or who operates a business in a rural area. Therefore, location influences the amount of rent that a person or a business must pay for the use of land as a natural resource. Are we still together, guys? Yes. And then we can then turn to the fourth one, which is the quality of resources. Very important. This will also influence the rent that is paid for the natural resources, guys. Very important. The quality of resources. What does this mean? This simply means that the higher the quality of natural resource ultimately means that that natural resource is going to produce a product of higher quality, which ultimately gives that product a higher value, economic value. Okay? Then ultimately, what does this mean? This means, in short, that the higher the quality of natural resources means the higher the rent paid for that natural resource. Meaning, if we have, for example, two coal mines, and we have a mine that has the high quality of coal, and we also have mine B that has the low quality of coal. The price that you're going to pay for the coal from mine A of high quality is going to be higher because electricity that is going to be generated by a coal from mine A will be of high quality and of high value compared to the electricity produced by the coal that is bought from mine B, which has the lower coal quality. Are we still together? Yes. So that is how the quality of resources again influences the prices for rent as a remuneration for factors of production. The higher the quality for natural resource, meaning the higher the quality of natural resources, the higher the value the product will be produced from that natural resource, because that natural resource is going to be used as an input. And remember, input is a factor of production. That means whenever there is a high quality of natural resources, the rent or the price of that natural resource will ultimately be higher compared to other similar natural resources that have the same of the same if the product is similar but rather the quality is not the same. Is there any questions? Right, guys. So, lastly, we are going to move to discuss technology. How does technology influence the price for natural resources, or influence an increase or an increase in the rent for which the natural resource commands? First thing first that you must understand is that to excavate the natural resources and convert them into goods and services, that process requires technology. And you realize that in modern days, technology keeps improving in order to make the extraction of natural resources and conversion thereof into final goods and services for that are ready for consumption is improving. Back in the day, our parents who used to work in the mine would tell you a story that they used to extract the gold or diamonds using shovels and spade and so forth back in the 1980s or 70s. But in modern day today, to extract the gold, coal, or any other mineral or natural resource for that matter, we use more advanced machinery, which is the products of an improved and appropriate technology. So new technology, guys, can assist to unlock a new natural resources that are difficult to extract. Bearing in mind with the example that I made that of our parents that used to work in the mines back in the 80s and 70s and 40s, that is, they were only able to mine to a certain extent. They were only able to extract the natural resources to a certain level because of the tools that they were using. However, technology has allowed the natural resources to be extracted beyond what a physical tool can do, meaning where they were unable to reach above the ground, technology has made it possible for the mining companies to extract those natural resources. Are we still together? Yes, as a result, the availability of new technology is a factor that can influence the rent for which natural resources can command, meaning the more advanced technology or the more technology is required. For instance, if you are able to mine 33,000 feet above the sea level, you require certain technology that may cost you around 40,000 rand, for example. But if you now want to mine further, meaning you want to mine about 66,000 feet above the sea level, of course, you're going to demand more advanced technology that is going to cost you more money. For example, maybe may require 80,000 or 90,000, make an example. So this means that the availability of new technology is a factor that can influence the rent for which the natural resources can command. Why? Because new technology can assist to unlock the new natural resources that are difficult to extract. And once those natural resources that are difficult to extract have been extracted, they can be used and be converted into final goods and services that may be available in the economy. Guys, that will bring an end to today's lesson where the we're discussing the factors that influences the remuneration for natural resources. If there are any questions, please do forward them for discussion and answers thereof will be provided. And in the next lesson, we will be introducing and discussing the analysis and remuneration of labor as a factor of production. Thank you.